Welcome, everybody. Hello. We are the OWASP Algiers Chapter, a part of the global OWASP community dedicated to advancing the state of cybersecurity. So, welcome, everybody. I hope that everybody is doing well today. Do you hear me, guys? Hello,
Yes,
hello.
we hear you, sir.
Yes.
Okay,
Hello.
perfect. Perfect. So, just I will give a small presentation about our chapter and dive into our training directly. Okay. So, as OWASP Algiers chapter, our mission is to provide Algerian cybersecurity community with a platform for learning, collaboration, and innovation. We organize webinars, workshop, and training sessions to share knowledge on cutting edge security topics, build skills, and foster partnerships. By joining us, you are becoming a part of the movement focused on securing application and contributing to a safer digital world. Whether you are industry professional, a student, or just curious, we are welcome all skills level to collaborate and grow together. We are thrilled to have you join us for today's session in the field of network security mastering WAF deployment. The training is being led by esteemed Mehdi Sammar, a highly experienced network security consultant. The training will provide in-depth knowledge on web application firewalls, WAFs, deployment, a critical aspect of securing both web and network infrastructures. The training will be divided on two sessions. Today is the first, and the second will be on the 1st of October, inshallah. At the end of the course, you will receive a course completion certificate. Make sure to send us a message. We look forward to diving into the essential topic and hope you find today's session both informative and engaging. So we can start now. Mehdi, take the lead, please. Mehdi, you can start now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hello, everyone. As I said, my name is Mehdi Sammar. I will be your instructor for this short 2 sessions training. Thank you for this nice introduction, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mehdi. Welcome.
Okay, so, this traditional who I am. So my name is Mehdi Sammar. I'm a network security consultant. It means that my field of expertise is in network security and with a background in networking, ethical hacking, but my deep focus is in network security. So I earned some certifications such as the Cisco Certified Instructor, Cisco CCNP in Security and Enterprise Networking. I also earned a Fortinet Certified Training Certification and an NSE 7. So in addition to network security, I also have a high interest in ethical hacking in general and network hacking in particular, which makes me, with a double color, a purple guy with a lot of blue teaming skills, or let's say my main field of expertise is in the blue teaming side, which means the network defensive, and also some other offensive or red teaming skills. Now, before we start in this training, I want to tell you a bit about the context of the training. When I was discussing with the OWASP Algeria chapter team, we decided to provide you with something that will be not very, very deep, not very, very specific, but it will be covering 2 topics related to cybersecurity. The first one is the networking, and the other one is web security. So I was thinking, and I said, how can I bring the most to this audience? Coming from a networking background, having this security experience, what is the most important thing that I can deliver from my standpoint? And it was a mix between networking and web security. Why? Because also OWASP is a leading organization in terms of security, and its historic is coming from a web security perspective. So I said, why not trying to mix that with a bit of networking? So the best option to, let's say, meet this exact requirement is to talk about web security firewalls or web application firewalls. Sorry. So we decided to deliver this training called, So this training called, the mastering the WAF deployment. Now, why WAF precisely? Like I said, to be able to deploy a WAF, you need to have basics and sometimes a bit deeper knowledge about networking and also about web security. And I noticed in the market that, and especially in Algeria, many people are fully dedicated to one of these two parts, whether they are purely dedicated to networking, I mean firewalling, routing, switching, something like that. And some others are deeply focused on security, software security, web security, penetration testing. Of course, we have people with these double, let's say, colors. It's blue and team and red people. But I've seen a lot of demand on this in the market, especially from juniors, from people getting from the university. So this is why we decided to have this training. Now, we agreed that the 2 sessions will be 2.5 hours each one. But, unfortunately, the last days I've been a little bit sick. So I decided to make it a bit shorter today. So inshallah, we'll have maybe 1 hour and 30 minutes as maximum, because I'm still in the recovery phase. I'm not 100% able to deliver 2.5 hours. Inshallah, next session, we'll try to catch up. We'll try to go a little bit deeper. And why not? We'll maybe discuss with the OWASP team to deliver maybe a 3rd session if necessary. Okay? So that was to put you in the context. So far, so good. Is it clear? Everyone is ready?
Yes, Mehdi, you can go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes,
welcome.
thank you.
Okay. So let me start with a question. Why do we need a WAF? For people who know already what is a web application firewall, can you tell me why do we need a WAF? You can just unmute yourself, or maybe you can just use the chat. Okay, any interesting answer in the chat? Yes?
Hello, everyone. I am Olgerta from Albania. One of the most I have worked previously with web applications firewall, concretely with Imperva. And one of the best practices to protect your web applications is by using a web application firewall. In this way, you can implement security policies to protect against the threats or against the incidents that might happen, to protect your websites or web applications against the threats that a threat actor can simulate or do in your infrastructure. So I think one of the best ways to protect your web services is by implementing web applications firewalls.
Okay, thank you. Very, very interesting. I can see also in the chat, Yusuf is saying dedicated protection to web application. And that's 100% true. Okay, but if we try to go a little bit into, let's say, the details, we can say, so also Morad is saying to protect us against app attacks, layer 7. That's correct, but it's most like, it's more generic. Malik is saying blocking HTTP traffic. Okay, it will be enough. Okay, we got interesting answers. And let me give you some reasons for which you may, let's say, try to get a WAF in your organization. The first one is simply to protect against web attacks. The term web application firewall comes from the firewalling, let's say, industry, which means that you will put an appliance, sometimes it can be even a software, that will isolate 2 areas. One area representing an untrusted network. Typically, this is the internet, which is untrusted because simply we don't know exactly who is connected on the internet. It's everyone. The other area is your internal applications that you have to secure. Now, this protecting against web attacks is very, very generic. It can go from the SQL injections, it can go to denial of service, all the possible web application attacks are possible to be blocked. And remember that the WAF is only focusing on web applications. There's no FTP, no, for example, any TCP traffic, only focusing on HTTP. Now, the second reason is to be compliant with security standards. So imagine that you are an international bank and you have to be compliant to specific standards, such as the ISO, such as the PCI DSS for your payment card industry, your payment card systems. So to be able to get your certifications as a compliant organization, the WAF can help you with that. Now, how? Because some industry standards, such as the PCI DSS, requires you to use a web application firewall. So the fact that you are using one will help you one step ahead to your goal toward getting compliant, these compliant certifications. Also, the use of WAF can help you with a real-time traffic monitoring capabilities. So you understand exactly what is, you understand exactly what is going on. When people are accessing your web applications, who is accessing? What are the IP addresses? What are the top countries accessing to my web applications? What are the top threats I'm facing? Is it SQL injections? Is it XSS injections? So you understand exactly what is going on from the security perspective. Also, sometimes, I say sometimes, a WAF, if it's well configured, can help you a lot for zero-day threat mitigation. And this is it became possible, especially when the industry started using machine learning. Modern WAF today, going from Fortinet to F5 big IP to many other vendors, are using machine learning to try to anticipate future attacks. So whenever we have a zero-day exploitation happening, the WAF has the possibility to block it. Now, that you can, I was just thinking about giving you the 4 most important reasons. Of course, there is a lot more. And if you want to rank them, remember that it's first and foremost for protecting against web attacks. This is very, very generic, and this can do the job for all the other reasons. Now, what we'll be talking about today, so remember, it's unifying web and network defense with mastering WAF deployment. Now, I said that the training will be made in 2 different sessions. The first one will be like the first or the base for the pyramid we want to build. We'll try to make, let's say, we'll try to discover a lot of concepts, but they will still basic concepts. So what is a WAF? How are you supposed to deploy it? What are the basic features? And then I will give you a demo to explain exactly how to do that. So we will answer the question, what is a WAF? WAF deployment basics. So what are the different scenarios? Then we will take one WAF deployment as a use case, and we'll try to understand exactly all the details behind. So if there is a NAT hide in your web applications, do you want to use the inline mode, one arm mode? So many concepts to take in consideration. So we'll take here, let's say, the most recommended design. The most recommended design by many vendors. And we'll try to discuss about it. Okay, this is why we're getting one use case. And then at the end, we will try to take this use case and deploy it in a virtual environment. So it will be a short demo in which we will deploy a WAF for a web application. So we deploy one WAF to protect a web application hosted in 2 servers, and it will be just basics. In the next session, inshallah, it will be taking the same demo, the same use case, but going into some extra details. So what happens if we have this situation? What happens if we need to configure like an IP-based protection? How can we make this possible? Okay, so this session is a prerequisite for the next one. Now, what is a WAF? So to answer this question, we can just say, we can just try to answer the why question. If you understand the why, you understand exactly what is a WAF. So it's an application layer protection appliance. Now, why? I said it. Why do we call it a web application firewall? So because it's a firewall. When we say firewall, we always mean isolation from the network perspective. What do we mean by isolation? It means that we always have a network with potential threats like this hacker here, and we have another network with our beloved applications. So here are my web applications. This is a threat. Now, from the general perspective, internet is a threat. Why? Because everyone has access to it. We have to put a WAF, the web application firewall, to isolate the 2 networks, to isolate the 2 regions. And this is why we use the term firewall. Now, why it's a web application? Because simply it focuses only on web protection, only. No FTP, no purely SQL. It's not here to protect specially databases. It's not here to protect file servers. It's not here to protect any operating system related exploitations, but only for web applications and everything related to that. Now, a WAF also is an appliance that most of the time deals with DOS mitigation. So what is a DOS mitigation? It's the capability of the WAF to absorb, sometimes stop, sometimes stop, it's a bit strong. It's most of the time mitigate. A denial of service attack. Now, you know that denial of service attack today are extremely dangerous if they are distributed. So a DDoS attack is what is considered the most advanced DOS attack that we can face today. And this is due to some bot behaviors. You know that we have a direct relation between DDoS attack and botnet networks. And this is why most of WAFs today, they deal with DDoS attacks, and they can also deal with bots. For example, you can find some WAFs that can detect a bot from a behavior analysis. It knows exactly that the bot is trying to scan a web application. Okay, it can also, most of the WAFs, makes the difference between a good bot and a bad bot. So what is a good bot? For example, it's the Google search engine. I'll be happy that Google is indexing my website. It's a bot, but I consider it as a good bot. Someone using Nmap and trying to scan your web application, or maybe he's using a web application vulnerability scanner, that's a bad bot. That's a bad bot. Most of WAFs today help you mitigate this kind of attacks. Now, also, for the real-time traffic monitoring, we said that this is the reason. But what is exactly monitoring and logging? Most modern WAFs, they are here to inspect traffic, but when they inspect, they can send you logging information. So you as an admin, you can be informed exactly about the attempts, successful attacks, statistics. This visibility brought by monitoring and logging can be extremely important for a response. You know, in cybersecurity, the most important concept today, which is relatively new compared to the others, is the response. So how am I supposed to respond to a cyber threat? The first step is by monitoring my web applications and then understanding the potential threats to take the necessary response action. Blacklisting an IP, maybe blocking access to a specific URL, deleting a file which is leaking some sensitive information. Every response effort requires a good monitoring and logging. So you cannot take the correct action without understanding what is exactly going on. Also, with modern WAFs, we find what we call the SSL or TLS offloading. So what is the SSL offloading? For people who know what is SSL, so this is an encryption protocol that uses certificates for authentication. So it's for encryption and authentication, that it can be running on a back-end web server. You know that in modern deployments, the web servers are most of the times virtual machines or virtual appliances. So you can have hundreds of virtual appliances, and each one of them is hosting a specific website. The traditional way to handle SSL or TLS protocol is to put SSL certificates in your web servers. Like this, if I have three, I need 3 web servers, as 3 web certificates, sorry. And then I can configure the SSL to secure every connection with the client. So this guy is connecting to my first server. We need a certificate and encryption keys to establish an encrypted tunnel with the clients. This is HTTPS. Now, you know that the TLS protocol, one of its, let's say, negative sides is it's a bit slow when it comes to the processing. It's a bit heavy protocol from the processing perspective, which makes your web servers, and most of the time I said VMs, can be a bit challenged in terms of CPU. Now, modern WAFs can use the SSL offload, which means that the SSL protocol will be disabled in servers and it will be replaced by one SSL deployment in the WAF application, in the WAF appliance. For example, you can put your web application firewall, and the web application firewall is itself the TLS server. So the certificate and encryption keys are hosted in the WAF. Now, whoever tries to establish an SSL or HTTPS connection with the application, the WAF is just talking to the client with TLS. And the TLS encryption decryption happens inside the WAF. And then plain text HTTP is sent to the backend servers. And then you can ask me a question. You can say, but Mehdi, even if we do that, it's still TLS encryption decryption is slow. Why the WAF is better than the backend servers? Why don't let in every single server dealing with its own TLS processing? And I can tell you that that's a good question. And the answer to that is that modern WAFs use what we call application-specific integrated circuits. An ASIC is a specific hardware that can process something at an incredible speed. Sometimes it's almost at wire speed. So if you are doing TLS encryption decryption on the web server, it will highly impact the CPU, but it will never, or at least not really, impact the CPU of your WAF. Why? Because most all of them, they use dedicated hardware for that. And dedicated hardware means always better speed. Okay, this is what we call SSL TLS offload. Sorry. Now, another feature provided by modern WAFs is the API security. You know that APIs are becoming more and more common today. Most applications, and you see that we have millions and billions of mobile applications. We have this for Android, iOS, and many other operating systems. So these applications rely most of the time about APIs. So if the API is not really well deployed or well used, this can be a major security concern. And this is why modern WAFs can do what we call the API gateway job. It means that your mobile application, so let's say this is a mobile, and inside it you have a web application, and this is your backend server hosting your web application, and then the API is running between them. Your WAF can receive API calls, okay, using, of course, HTTP, like the RESTful API. It can inspect the API exchange content. If it's okay, it can forward this to the web applications, which makes it an API gateway. Now, you can say that these features are the most important features that you can find in a WAF. I can call them, these are the core features. These are the core features, and they are purely dedicated to security. Modern WAFs also use what we call load balancing and traffic distribution capabilities. In most web application firewalls, there is a possibility for the WAF to load balance traffic between different web servers. And the simplest example for that is you have a client trying to access a huge web application hosted in a web cluster. So you have 3 web servers, for example, and the servers are sharing the same web application. They are all running the same application. And most of the time they are sharing the same database. Now, how am I supposed to use the 3 web servers as a simple logical one application? I can deploy my WAF and I can use its load balancing capabilities, which means the traffic from the client will only point to the WAF, and using a load balancing algorithm like round robin, I can send the first client to this server, the next client will go to this server, the next one will go to this server, and most web application firewalls provide very interesting load balancing capabilities, okay, which makes them, let's say, a ready-to-use, full-featured web protection appliance. So far, so good? Any question? Okay. Guys, if you need any question, you can use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Just raise your hand, and I'll be happy to hear from you. Now, when we understand what is a WAF, okay, it's
Mehdi?
an appliance. Yes?
Could you hear me? I think someone has a question.
Yes.
Do you think you can answer it now or the end of the session?
Now, if it's a short question, that's fine. I
Okay,
can answer it now.
Okay, Mahmoud, could you write your question? He's saying 40 ADC. Could you
Yes.
please specify as then using? Just
So
try to
what I understand from Mahmoud is that we can use a dedicated application delivery appliance, or what we call next generation load balancers. Yes, of course. Mahmoud is saying that we can use a dedicated load balancer, or what we call in modern terminology, the application delivery controller server. Of course, there is appliances that specialize in load balancing. They are dedicated to load balancing capabilities. We have from Fortinet the 40 ADC, from, for example, the F5, we have the LTM, the big IP load balancer, but it's still, we have the possibility to do it for our web applications using the WAF. Now, this answer is obliging me to tell you something. Guys, in security in general, there is always two ways to do things. You can do things in a decentralized way. It means that every feature is provided by a dedicated appliance. I have a dedicated WAF, dedicated firewall, dedicated load balancer, and I can have the centralized approach. It means that I can use an all-in-one device, like a next generation firewall, that can provide me with WAF capabilities, load balancing capabilities, firewall capabilities, intrusion prevention system. Now, what is the best option? The answer is there is no best option. It depends on the situation. If you are in a really large environment, you're working for a really huge organization that can get the budget for that, they have the required human resources, skills, budget to do it, of course, having a decentralized approach is much more powerful. You can put thousands, couple of thousands of dollars just to get a load balancer, other $1,000 to get a WAF, other to get a firewall, and so on. But do you have the resources for that? Also, if you are working in a small organization, can you put millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars for that? Of course not. Do you have the human skills to do it? No. You can use the centralized approach, like use a WAF that will give you some intrusion prevention system capabilities, load balancing capabilities, can give you many other capabilities. But the takeaway from this is that the decentralized approach is always much powerful, but it's not suitable to any organization. And I hope that I answered the question in a good way, Mahmoud.
Mehdi,
Yes?
this is Raghav from India.
Yes?
I have a questions here. Since you talk about like various features or the features which are involved with that, maybe in case of like cloud, maybe the
Yes.
same thing will be applicable with cloud also.
Oh, that's a good question.
In
Thank you. So here we can say that we are seeing more and more cloud-based web application firewalls. For example, you have some WAF services provided natively in Amazon, in Azure. You can have, for example, a FortiWeb appliance directly deployed in the WAF as a service. But that's a good question. Are all the features available in the cloud-based or the on-premise WAF? And the large answer to that is yes. Most of these features can be provided by a cloud-based WAF and also an on-premise WAF. But of course, I'm not going into the details. For example, if you are talking about the SSL offload, I have explained that it's done through what we call application-specific integrated circuits. These are hardware components that are not available in cloud environments. So for example, you can do TLS offload, but it's not really similar to when you do it in a hardware appliance. Make sense?
but in case of cloud, we have a bare metal or something there are separate cloud instance for it, which is provided to a certain customers, or it will be a privileged one or hybrid cloud. Or in hybrid cloud, that might be some kind of chances the similar kind of hardware will be used.
Yes, but the WAF, whether it's native on the cloud or on-premise, if you have a multi-cloud approach, that's not really making a big difference. Why? Because from the networking perspective, your web traffic should only go to the WAF. Then the WAF will take it and inspect it and send it back to your backend. And will be much more clearer when we talk about the deployment basics. Okay?
Okay. Thanks for Mehdi.
Welcome. Thank you for the question.
And another question here, maybe like
Yes.
since you talk about WAF, like the intelligence will play the important role.
Sorry, can you repeat it?
Intelligence or
Security
intelligence
intelligence.
feeds. Yeah.
Yes. Most modern WAFs today, they rely on their vendor security intelligence. At least they are using the vendor. Personally, I specialize in the Fortinet FortiWeb. Okay, I'm
Okay.
specialist on that. I have some experience with the F5 ISM, the Application Security Manager, but I didn't
Yes.
have a lot of or extensive experience on that. If you take the
Yeah.
FortiWeb as an example, the FortiWeb relies on what we call the FortiGuard Cloud security intelligence feeds. So the WAF can get security intelligence data such as known botnets, bad reputed IPs, bad robots. All of this information, also it can be intrusion prevention signatures, can be also antivirus hashes. All of these can be downloaded by the WAF as security intelligence updates. And of course, they can be used by the FortiWeb or any other WAF, okay, it depends on the vendor, to stop threats without deep analysis. Security intelligence, yes, it's supported. And the main goal is to not inspect something that we already know it that it's bad. Okay, for example, if I have someone known by FortiGuard services as a bad hacker, he has the public IP 1.1.1, why accepting traffic from this guy, inspecting it, then to make the final decision to block it? Why not blocking it from the beginning? I got from the FortiGuard the 111 is a bad reputation IP. So whenever I get any connection from that IP, I can block it in a very early way. This is to preserve resources, and this is to use the power of the vendor security intelligence. Okay.
Thanks, Mehdi.
You're welcome.
Even
Say also
even I
something.
Oh, sorry.
In
Yes.
in addition to what we are saying, more to discuss. Also I have also, as I mentioned previously, I have also worked with Imperva Secure Sphere WAF Web Application Firewall, and they also have the integrated the threat intelligence, that is a threat radar, and did the same thing that you mentioned by including also all the data feeds, like malicious IP addresses, anonymous proxies that were proxy servers used by attackers to hide the true locations, Tor network, because also the attackers use Tor and outbound nodes of the identity and location that obfuscates Tor network, IP geolocation, phishing URLs, comment spammers, and also by using the up-to-date reputation data, they stop bots and hackers, and also prevent attacks like DDoS, site scraping, and comment spam. Mostly, the web applications firewalls are integrated also with the threat intelligence. More to discuss and to
yeah,
add.
even with most of the WAF, like we might have the threat intel which is updated on a daily basis because
Yeah.
each and every day the signature might change.
Yes, that's exactly that. And the most important thing in this threat intelligence is that you are using the power of the threat intelligence team by your vendor or even for some open source sources. Like you're not really dealing with the internet threats by your own, let's say, weapons. You're using the vendor specific researchers, bots, SOC teams. Everything is bring together to give you this ready to use information. And this is
It is
becoming
distributed alert.
Exactly. And it's becoming a necessity today.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Okay.
where like we are
Uh,
using taxi or something like the sticks, taxi. Those are the acronyms which are used in like threat intelligence. I just want to give a heads up with all the attendees. They can see about taxi. That is something
Exactly.
like TA.
And taxi is, it's about to become a widely adopted standard for threat intelligence
Yeah,
exchange.
yeah.
Okay. So guys, let's move to the next point, the WAF deployment basics. Now, in this part, I will try to give you the most important concepts to understand about how are you supposed to deploy a WAF. And I believe that there is two concepts. If you understand them, you can deploy any WAF from any vendor. The concepts are, first, the physical deployment modes. And here we have two, what we call the inline and the one arm. And we have what we call the operation modes. The reverse proxy, this is something, sometimes the vendor changes the naming of the mod, but the logic is always the same. So reverse proxy, offline, and transparent modes. Now, when you understand the physical deployment, what is inline, what is one arm, and then what is the operation mode, you can always take the right decision that will suit your needs and that will also protect your web application in the most effective way. Now, first, what is the physical deployment? The physical deployment describes how the WAF application, the WAF appliance, is physically deployed in the network. And in this physical deployment, we have only two possibilities, only two. The inline means, sometimes we call it the two-arm deployment. It means that your untrusted network, like the internet, the protected web applications, okay, and the WAF is in the middle, but it must be connected with two interfaces. Network. Other interface or the trusted networks. Now, from the physical perspective, it's impossible to bypass it because traffic is going like this, processed by the WAF, then the WAF will the applications. It's impossible to bypass it. Even if your application is powered off, imagine that you lose your WAF. Oh, sorry. Even if you lose your WAF, it's impossible to go directly to the web application. And of course, we have, if you think that this is a problem, there is an option to bypass it. But if it's, it's optional, you can do it. If you use most WAF standard deployment configurations, the WAF is impossible to be bypassed. This is what we call the inline. Why? Because it's always in the path of the traffic. On the other hand, if you are talking about the one-arm mod, it means that you have the untrusted traffic or the network, internet, your web applications in the other side, and you have nothing in between, but the WAF is offline. It's out of band, which means you will try to configure your infrastructure. For example, here you have a router, maybe you have a firewall, you have a switch, but you will try to configure your network to always send to the WAF, and the WAF will send to the backend servers. Now, what made the traffic go to the WAF? It's a config that you put in your network device. Maybe it's in the router, maybe it's in the switch, maybe it's a firewall. You are doing something to force traffic to go logically through the WAF. But there is always a possibility, if we misconfigure this network component, there is always a physical possibility to go and bypass the WAF. So from the security perspective, if you are starting from scratch, consider using the inline deployment. Why? Because it's more secure. Guys, if you find this a bit challenging to understand, let me give you an analogy. So imagine that this is a building you have, okay? This is a building, an area you have to secure. Let's say that here you have your administration, and no one should go to the administration without being inspected. So this is the outside area. This is a street outside of your building. You can put a security guard in two different options. For example, you can put in the door, let's say this is the door that allows your guests to come in, and you will put a small room, and inside it there is a security guy. So you have to go inside, be checked by the security guard, then from that room there is a second door to go to the administration. This is the logic of the inline deployment. If I'm talking now about the one arm, I will do this. I will just put a door here, and I will put another area where here I have my security guy, and I will instruct people using a signalization panel, please go to check the security guard. Of course, people will go here, get checked by the security guard, and they will go then to the administration. But what if someone tries to do this? It will still possible. Physically speaking, it's possible. So this is weaker than using the inline approach. And that is exactly the same case with your web application firewall. Okay, now when we understand what is the inline and one-arm deployment, let's discuss about the operation mode. And I told you most web application firewalls use one of these. The first one, which is the most secure, is what we call the reverse proxy. Now, what is a reverse proxy? A reverse proxy means that the client will physically and from the IP perspective connect to the WAF. So the client here will initiate traffic to the WAF IP address. So here is IP traffic. If you go to the source IP, you will find the client IP as a source, and you will find the WAF IP as a destination. So from the IP perspective, this guy is talking to the WAF. Then this connection is stopped, inspected, and if the connection is legitimate, there is no threats inside, the WAF can start a new IP connection to reach out to the backend servers. So from the network perspective, the client is talking to the WAF, then server IP, which means two separate IP connections. Now, why this is the most secure? Because also, if the WAF is down, the clients can never reach the backend applications directly. The WAF becomes a mandatory hop. You have to go through it because your IP address is pointing to the WAF itself. Now, how are we making this possible? We're making this possible by using, most of the time, DNS protocol. In the DNS protocol, for example, this is my DNS. You are pointing your www.owasp.org FQDN to the public IP that is hosted on the WAF. Okay, it's pointing to the WAF. So from the DNS perspective, whenever you say www.owasp.org, you will always point to the WAF. The connection is done, It's over from the network perspective, and a completely new connection is established from the WAF to the backend. This is what we call the reverse proxy. Now, what is the offline mode? The offline mode is when your WAF is just receiving a copy of the traffic. The traffic is never pointed to the WAF itself. Instead, I have a client, he's pointing to a web application and will take a copy of the traffic and send it to the WAF. How are we supposed to do that? For people coming from the networking field, they know, for example, if you have a switch, you will use what we call the port mirroring. What is port mirroring? You will instruct the switch and say, please switch whatever you receive, go into the server, send a copy to the WAF. Now, the offline mode is the weakest mode from the security perspective. Why? Because imagine that we have a threat. So imagine that, so let me remove the switch. Imagine that someone is sending a specific exploit to the backend application. Let's say this is a SQL injection. When the SQL injection is sent, the switch forwards it to the web application and send in the same time a copy to the WAF. So the WAF here is meant just to get a copy for monitoring reason. So your goal most of the time when you are using the offline mode is just to see what is going on. It's not your goal to stop the attack. Maybe you have deployed a dedicated intrusion prevention system inside the web server. So you don't really care if the attack will make it up to the application. So you'll just monitor and check what is going on. This is why the offline mode is the... Now, another deep operation mode is what we call the transparent mode. So what is the transparent mode? The transparent mode means that the WAF is put in line. It's mandatory. This is the WAF. Inline means one interface going to the threat, one application going to the protected application. But if we talk from the network perspective, the client is sending traffic to the web server. The WAF in the middle is acting as a layer 2 device, the OSI layer 2 device. What does it mean? It means that the WAF has no IP address. There is no traffic going to the WAF itself, but instead, the WAF is just doing what we call traffic pickup. Whenever a traffic is going through the WAF is just acting as a switch, but it can make decision to drop it or forward it. But from the client perspective, if you see the IP addresses, you will see the client IP as a source, and you will see the server IP as a destination. So from the IP perspective, the client is talking to the server, and transparently, the WAF is spying on them and can block the connection at any given time. Now, that was a small explanation about the 3 different operations mode. Let me give you a bit or a piece of advice. The reverse proxy mode is the most secure. Why? Because from the networking perspective, you are talking always to the WAF. The offline mode is the less secure. Why? Because the WAF is just receiving a copy of the traffic. The WAF is not really involved in the exchange. It's just watching what is going on. The transparent mode is secure, but it's used in situations when you don't want to have network change. And let me explain this point. Imagine that you already have a web application, okay? This is hosted in the server, and you only have a firewall. you don't have a WAF, and you are dealing with this network for, let's say, a few months. One day, you decided to introduce a WAF. If you decide to introduce the WAF in a reverse proxy mode, you have to change at least your DNS configuration. Why? Because before having the WAF, the IP connection is pointing to the web server. So whoever is doing the DNS resolution, it's pointing directly to the web application. The day that you decided to use a reverse proxy, the IP connection will point instead to the WAF. Then from the WAF, you can send back to the web server. So there is at least few changes from the network perspective. You will change sometimes routing, you can change DNS, it depends. With the transparent mode, since the connection is going to the web application, so the WAF is not involved, we don't change anything from the network perspective. Only we have to break this link, put the WAF in the middle, like this, and then keep the traffic pointing to the backend server. And nothing is changing from the configuration perspective. This is very, very interesting for cloud environments where we have a lot of change. Things are not really stable. We are deploying web applications, we're deploying servers in a very fast way. So we need to never disturb the network. And this is a good option as in this situation. Yes, it's in dynamic environments. Now, guys, now to understand exactly what is the best option for deployment, you have to mix between the physical deployments, what you learned here, and what you learned about the operation modes to understand the final deployments. What is exactly the deployment? For example, if you try to use the reverse proxy, you can see that it can be deployed in both physical modes. It can be in the inline physical deployment or the one-arm physical deployment. How is that possible? If you are using the inline, like this is the WAF, this is the backend servers, it's very easy. You are just sending traffic to the WAF, then the WAF breaking the connection. The WAF is receiving in one interface, like this is port 1, and then it will transmit through another interface. But from the network perspective, you're pointing to the WAF, and the WAF is pointing to the backend. Now, what if you decide to deploy it with one arm? So one arm can be also using the operation mode reverse proxy. So how are you supposed to do that? You will just, for example, use a switch here. Oh, sorry. You can use a switch here, and then you will deploy the WAF like this. You will put it here. Then this is the switch. You will instruct the client. Of course, I'm making some abstraction. I'm not talking about the fact that there is a firewall, there is, many other appliances that are involved here. But you will instruct users using DNS to always point to the WAF IP. So the DNS resolution is saying www.owasp.org is pointing to the WAF IP. So the client will always do this. The connection is stopped. Then the WAF will connect and forward to the backend, but it's always using the same interface. From the IP perspective, I have two connections. From the physical perspective, I'm using the same application, the same port. In the inline, it's from the IP perspective different, but I'm using also different interfaces. Now, if you have the choice in your deployment, would you prefer to use the reverse proxy in inline or in one arm mode? What do you think? If you have the choice, what do you prefer? Guys, the answer is the inline. Exactly. Thank you. Solanki, thank you. The inline is more secure. It cannot be bypassed. No bypass possible. So you are using the best option from the operation mode and the best option from the physical deployment. And you are using what we finally call the reverse proxy inline deployed. Now for the offline mode, the option or the only option we have is to use one arm. Remember that the offline mode is just receiving traffic. So here, offline mode, we need to receive traffic. So we have to deploy the WAF in one arm. So you put the switch, you have the port mirroring, and the traffic is directly going to the backend application, and a copy is sent to the WAF. So offline deployment mode works only with the one arm physical deployment. For the transparent mode, it works only with the inline deployment. You cannot have a transparent deployment using the inline. So here you should, you cannot use the one arm. It must be inline. Why? Because the transparent mode reuses what I called the session pickup. So the traffic must go through the device. Now, from this explanation, you can clearly see that the reverse proxy mode is the most flexible because it gives you options to deploy it inline, one arm, and it's also the most secure. Okay. Now, guys, let's discuss about a simple use case. And this is exactly what we'll be doing in the demo. Okay, in the demo. This is the most common and the most secure deployment. Of course, don't take it as the general truth. For a specific environment, the most secure deployment can be something else. But from the general perspective, if I'm thinking like deploying from scratch, I have no prerequisite, I have no conditions, I can think about using the inline reverse proxy deployment, which means the WAF is deployed physically with two interfaces. The first port is going to the client. In the real life, here you have the internet, okay? And the client is behind the internet. Then another port is connected to the backend servers. In the real life, you can find here routers, and here there is your data center. So the data center is hosting your web applications, the internet is hosting your clients, and the WAF is in the middle. Now that was the inline deployment. Now, when you deploy the WAF, you go to its configuration and you choose its operation mode. And in my case, I will choose reverse proxy. Reverse proxy means that whenever the WAF receives a connection, it stops it and then use a new IP connection to reach back or to reach the backend servers. And this is the most important one. Now, the next session, we will be talking about some deeper details about this. Because let me just ask you a question, and I will not give you the answer. You will be, it's a bit of, suspense for the next session. When you are using the reverse proxy, we said that the traffic is going from the client to the WAF. So if the client IP is, let's say, the 1.1.1.1, the WAF IP is 2.2.2.2, the other ports on the WAF is using, for example, the 10.1.1.1, and the backend server is using the 10.1.1.2, 10.1.1.3. If I'm using exactly these IP addresses, and I'm using the reverse proxy mode, can you tell me what is the source IP and destination IP for this blue connection? This arrow here in blue. What is the source IP? what is the destination IP? Can you write it in the chat? Yasmin is saying source is 111. That's correct. And the destination is 2.2.2.2. Perfect. Now, the WAF takes the connection, inspects it, of course, using its security capabilities, and then starts a completely new connection from the WAF to one of the backend servers. Now, who can tell me what is the source IP and the destination IP for that pink arrow, that connection? Exactly. It's the 10.1.1.1 going to the 10.1.1.2. Now, that's exactly what happens. Now, let me give you, let's say, a small challenge. What if the web developer responsible for this web application is asking you to see the source IP of the real client? What if in the web application, for example, using the IP address, you can detect the country? This is what we call the geo IP. I can know the country, and I can select the right language for that user. So if this user here is coming from Algeria, from its IP, the web application is supposed to send an Arabic traffic. But if the guy here is coming from India, we are supposed to send English traffic or Indian language traffic. So the web developer is asking you to do something so the backend server will not see the WAF IP, because you can clearly see that the source IP address used by the WAF is its own IP, and you cannot know exactly what is the IP of the client. In a simpler way, if you are using the simple reverse proxy deployment with most WAFs, the backend servers or the source IP of the client is hidden. The server doesn't know exactly who is connecting. How are we supposed to fix that? We will discuss about this in the next session. Another thing that you have to take in consideration. In most critical networks, the web applications require out-of-band management. What does it mean, out-of-band management? It means that your backend servers are connected with one port. For example, this is Ethernet 0. One port is connected to the WAF. Another port may be used for management access. And this is a requirement. This is what we call in networking an out-of-band management, the OOB network. This out-of-band management is a completely isolated network that is connected to the backend servers with other ports, like this is Ethernet 1, this is Ethernet 1, and all the management stuff, this is an admin, is connected to the out-of-band network. This is to try to isolate what we call production traffic going to the clients and the management traffic coming and going to the admins. Now, when you do this, you can face a major network problem called asymmetric routing. For example, I'm just exposing the problems, okay? I'm not providing solutions now. If you are doing that, imagine that your out-of-band network is also itself connected to the internet. So here is the internet, excuse me. Okay, this is my out-of-band network. What if this is internet, clients are connected to the internet, the WAF is connected to the internet, and also the out-of-band network is connected to the internet? Now, someone can ask me the legitimate question, but why do we connect a management network to the internet? And the simple answer to that is for example, for operating system updates. This server needs to check the updates. So it will be done through a out-of-band management network. So the server has two possible ways to reach out to the internet. Raghav is saying for NTP, exactly. If you want your server to do NTP synchronization, this is done through the management network. So the server will be in a situation where two possible paths are possible to reach the internet. The server will say, I can go through Ethernet 1, but I can also go through Ethernet or Ethernet 0, or I can also go through Ethernet 1. This can lead to what we call asymmetric routing. Now, to avoid situations like that, what are the recommendations? What are the solutions? And this is what we will discuss in the next session. This will be a bit deeper into the networking, okay? Perfect. Do you have any question, guys? Omar is saying usually a jump server. You mean a jump server for updates? Yes, that's an option. Yes. Akram is saying, what about the default gateway? So Akram, you're asking the exact question, because when you have two different paths to reach the internet, it means that you can have two different gateways. Which one to select? That's the answer. And we'll discuss about this in the next session, inshallah. We'll discuss about how are we supposed to fix that, and how can you avoid that. Okay, there is a question from Fadi. So he said that WAFs are here to secure applications, but he believes that everything can be breached. Of course. Of course, everything can be breached. Even the WAF itself can be breached. Okay? This is why the WAF itself can be updated.
I think Mehdi has problem with the connection.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, Mehdi, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I was just dropped from the meeting.
Okay.
I don't know why. Okay, so I was saying that, sorry, the chat was cleared. I can no longer see the questions. Yes, the question was, can we put two WAFs? And the answer is yes. But why? If you consider having a layered security, like you want to apply the defense in depth doctrine, that's yes. And you can do it in really, really sensitive environments. Like you can have two WAFs from two different vendors. Okay, one getting from F5, one from Fortinet. So you make sure that even if there is a vulnerability in the first vendor, it will not be present in the second one. Okay, so the answer is yes, but you have to consider why are you, or do you want to do that? Okay, so guys, now it's time for the demo. So I don't know if we are supposed to take a short 5-minute break. So like this, you can re-energize. From my side, I will try to drink something hot. What do you think? Let me check with the...
Hey, Mehdi, Yes,
Yes?
of course. Yes, of course. We can take 5 minutes breaks. No problem. So we will return about 2025.
Exactly. Yes, we
Okay.
got more than 1 hour of explanation. I think it's a lot. So we have to take 5 minutes and then we'll start with the demo.
Okay, no problem, no problem. So
Perfect.
we will return in 2025. Oh,
Okay, good.
okay.
Mehdi?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for your inputs. I just want to know about like deployment of like WAF, like while doing the pilot testing, how we do with that on a pilot test.
Excuse me, can you repeat it, please?
No, I'm talking about pilot testing. Like maybe whenever they are trying to approach and try to procure some tools, they do the
Okay.
pilot testing.
Okay.
In that case, like what might be the best practices or something like you can give us?
You mean testing softwares, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about WAF only. Like when we try to implement some kind of tool, like we do some kind of POCs, proof of concepts.
Honestly, this is not really something I'm dealing with. Like software testing is not part of my, skill set. If
Oh,
you're
no,
talk
no, no.
now,
This
if you're
is,
talking about the demo, you're talking about the demo.
yep.
Okay, so for the demo, I suggest that I will be just doing the demo. I will explain exactly how are you supposed to do it. But to take the
Okay,
maximum from this, just watch me doing that, ask questions, and then you can have the recording. The OWASP team will just make it available on YouTube. You can just do the demo by your own.
sure.
The tools we'll be doing, I will share it. I will share them with the OWASP team so they can provide them in the video description. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So what I'm asking you is just to concentrate, understand exactly what I'm doing. Don't try to remember the steps, okay? Just try to understand them. And this will be enough for you to do it by your own.
Sure.
Thank you. So guys, in
Thank
this
you.
demo, you're welcome. The basic WAF deployment for a web application. So first and foremost, we'll start deploying a WAF, and I have selected the FortiWeb for that. First, because it's a very nice technology. This is something I'm specialized in. And also, it doesn't require a lot of resources to run it in your own client PC. Okay, no need to have a very, very high memory or CPU. Then, when we deploy it, we will configure a very simple WAF policy. Now, the terminology I'm using here, this is a terminology used by FortiWeb, but also by other vendors. We'll use what we call a VS, real servers pool, and a web protection. And finally, after configuring all of these, we will test the access without enabling web security and then enabling web security. So you will see that the WAF is able to block traffic, and you can see exactly in the logs how the attacks are happening and what is exactly the type of the attack. So for this, I have prepared the following topology. So I have already deployed a client PC with Kali Linux. This is already deployed in my case. If you don't know exactly how to deploy a Kali VM, I suggest you to check that on, you can Google it. It's something very, very affordable to anyone. Many videos about this. I already deployed 2 different Linux servers. Okay, this is deployed already, and this is also deployed. Now, both servers share exactly the same configuration. The only exception to that is the IP. Excuse me, there is a small mistake in the slide. Let me correct it right now. The IP is different. Okay, this is 102 and this is 101. Let me correct it right now. Okay, this is 101. Okay. Now, let me explain this topology. I have this Kali Linux on the network 10.110/24 with the IP address .20. So 10.1.1.20 is the Kali Linux. It's connected on my VMware workstation VMnet 1. Okay, this is somehow similar to a switch, but this is virtual. Everything is deployed in my PC. In the other side, we have these two servers deployed in the network 172.16.1.0/24 in the VMware VMnet 2. This is also similar to a logical switch. Now, this is my untrusted network, and this is my trusted network. So what is the deployment I'm using in the lab? Can you tell me what is this deployment? Is it inline on one arm? Exactly. Olgerta, Hayat, yes, it's inline. Exactly. What is now the operation mode? Olga is saying reverse proxy. And the answer is we cannot know. Guys, I know that you have guessed it because I will use the best option. Yes, but from the topology, it's impossible to know the operation mode. This is, of course, inline from the physical perspective, but I can configure it in the system configuration as a reverse proxy or transparent. But of course, you guessed it right. I will use the reverse proxy mode, which is the default. With the FortiWeb, the reverse proxy is the default deployment operation mode. Now, as you can see, the WAF is deployed using its port 1. It's not yet deployed. I will deploy it. So I will deploy a VM, which is a FortiWeb. The port 1 will be connected to the VMnet 1, and I will configure the IP 10.1.1.1. In the other side, I will configure the port 2 using the IP 172.16.1.1. Now, let me show you the Kali Linux and the two Linux servers that are deployed in my VMware workstation. So I'm using everything in my local PC, okay? This is, oh, sorry. That's PowerPoint. This is my workstation. You see Web 1, this is the first web server. You can clearly see that a web server. Oh, sorry. Just a simple Linux server. If config, you can clearly see the IP address being used, 172.16.1.102. Web 1, same thing. It's exactly the same server. If config, you see the IP address, 172.16.1.101. If I go to my Kali Linux, I'm using just a default VM with Kali as a password. This is my Kali Linux. There is no WAF deployed yet. Okay. Now I will show you the VM I will be using for that specific deployment. So where is the, okay. So this is a folder I will be sharing with you. This is a VM. This is its OVF file, and this is its disk. Simply, I will just double click on the VM OVF file. I'm asked to accept the license agreement. Fortinet gave you 15 days free trial. okay, without paying anything. You can download that from the website, and you can just use it for trial. I will call it WAF, as simple as that. Import, and my virtual appliance is deploying now. You see, it's very, very interesting to use FortiWeb because the disk is only about 200 megabytes. If you compare it to some other vendors, you may find a heavy VM. It requires much more resources to run it. Okay, this is my WAF. Let me put it in my folder. I will just power it on. So the WAF is powering on. Guys, the FortiWeb, when you really deploy it, if it was a physical appliance, it comes with the default IP address. So if it was a physical appliance, I can just connect my PC using my network cable to the port 1, and I can use the default IP to reach my FortiWeb. Since I have a VM, I can have access to this console. So what I will do is to configure first an IP address for port 1. Okay? Now, after I just configure this IP address, I will be able to open my browser, and then I will connect to the graphical user interface. The recommendation from Fortinet, and this is the case for the most of the available WAFs, is to do the minimum configuration in the CLI and continue most of the configuration in the GUI. Why? Because this is help you avoid mistakes. So I'm just waiting for my virtual machine to be deployed. You see, it's initializing the database. In the meantime, here in the deployment, okay, the steps we will be configuring are, let me describe them before we go into the details. Here we will configure the WAF IP for management, and this is using the CLI. Then we will configure the WAF other IP for port 2 using the GUI. When we finish that, we will check the operation mode. You will see that it's a reverse proxy by default. And I will, walk you through the GUI in a very quick way. When we finish that, we will configure all these components that I will explain in a moment. So I'll go back to my VM. You see, my VM is deployed. FortiWeb login. So I will use admin. No password is required. I'm asked to change the password. I will put anything. Okay. Now I'm connected to my FortiWeb CLI. How am I supposed to configure an IP address? So I will go to port 1. Okay, I will use port 1 as my, okay. So I will just connect this specific IP. And by the way, my physical PC, I mean my laptop, my hardware PC, is connected to all these networks. Okay, so I can configure port 1 with 10.1.1. Okay, that's the IP. And I can use my Firefox in my physical PC to configure the WAF. So Kali Linux, I will just keep it for test. Okay, so let me start with this IP address. How to configure that? I will just say config system interface. Now I'm inside the interface configuration. I can say edit port 1. I want to configure just port 1. Then set IP 10.1.1/24. That's the IP. Now, do I want to manage the WAF itself? I mean, is this interface for web traffic plus management? Yes. So in my case, I don't have a dedicated management interface. I can say set allow access. HTTP, HTTPS, SSH, and ping. This command means that I'm able to ping the WAF to check its reachability. I can use HTTP and HTTPS to configure it through its graphical interface. And I can use SSH to remotely access the CLI. When I configure that, that's enough. I just say end, and Fortinet ends means commit and save. So when I say end, the configuration takes effect and it's saved. Now, only with these three configuration or these three lines of configuration, my FortiWeb now has a port 1 ready to be used. I will just open Firefox. Oh, let me open. Excuse me, where is my Firefox? Oh, come on. Okay, this is my Firefox. I can use 10.1.1.1. Oh, sorry, I forgot something. Of course, when you deploy a new VM, the VM is not connected to the specific VMnets. Remember, port 1 should be put in VMnet 1 and port 2 should be put in VMnet 2. If you don't do that, the ports are binded to the physical network. So I can go to my VM, right click, go to settings, and then I can go to my first port. You see, when you see network adapter without a number, that's port 1. I will put it on custom specific virtual network, VMnet 1. So I have assigned port 1 to VMnet 1. I go then to VMnet 2 and I assign it to, or port 2, I assign it to VMnet 2. Now you see port 1, VMnet 1, port 2, VMnet 2. Let me just say save. Okay, so it's similar to connecting physically the WAF to the switch. Now I go back to my browser. You see, I'm going into the GUI, admin, the password. And now I'm connected to the FortiWeb graphical user interface. You know, Fortinet is known with its very nice GUIs, very intuitive, very simple, nice colors. You know, it's very, very interesting to configure this GUI. Now, if I want to configure the second port IP, I can go to network, interface, and from here you can see the VM and all the available ports from port 1 to port 10. If it was a physical FortiWeb, you can have more than 10 ports. So it depends on the model. You can see that the port 1 is already configured. This is what I did from the CLI. Now let me configure the port 2. I can go and say 172, remember, 16.1.1/24. Am I supposed to manage from that interface? Let's say no. I just want to ping. Okay? And I have configured a second interface. Now, if it was a real deployment, it's very important to configure routing. What do I mean by routing? In my example, the WAF is right in the middle. It's directly connected to the Kali and it's directly connected to the servers. In a real scenario, you will never find this. At least you will find routers, firewalls. So you need to configure default routes or a default route and sometimes advanced routing for your WAF to reach the internet and reach the backend servers. Okay, remember, session 1 is for simplicity. We understand the basics. So nothing I will configure, everything will work. Now, to check if my WAF is configured properly, I can open the CLI. No need to go back to the VMware. I have a CLI from this shortcut, and I can say execute ping 10.1.1.10. That's the IP of my Kali Linux. And you can see that my WAF is reaching my Kali Linux. So port 1 is configured correctly. Now I will say execute ping 172.16.1.101. That's the first web server. You can see it's reachable. Same thing for the second one, 102. It's reachable. Now I have finished my deployment. Now, how am I supposed to check the operation mode? I can go to dashboard, status, and from that status, you can see that it's a standalone. The host name is FortiWeb, that's a serial number. And this is the operation mode, reverse proxy. If you want to change that, I can just click this shortcut and I'm redirected to system config operation. And I can switch between the modes. Remember, proxy, offline, and transparent. In reality, FortiWeb supports 2 transparent deployments. There is 2 options for that, but I'm not getting into the details. Now, everything is okay. I have now exactly this topology running. Now, what is the next step? Remember, the next step is to configure the WAF policy. First and foremost, what is a WAF policy? A WAF policy is a configuration object that instructs the WAF to accept traffic, to inspect it, and forward it. So whenever you want to configure a WAF policy, in FortiWeb, we call it a server policy. Okay, this is a terminology used by Fortinet. Inside the policy, you have to answer 3 questions. The first question is which IP and TCP port the client is pointing to, which IP, or which IP and port. When I say port, I'm talking about TCP 80, TCP 443. You can also say which physical interface the FortiWeb is listening on. It's like configuring a listener. Okay? The client will point to a specific IP. Where the IP is configured, it's inside the WAF. What is the TCP port? Are you using the standard TCP 80? Are you using a different port? That's, customizable. In my example, I want to say the application is listening on 10.1.1, for example, 100. That's the IP address that the clients will point to. The port I'll be using ARC 80, and the interface is port 1. You know what this configuration is telling us? It's telling us the following. It's telling us that the client will come and point to the port 1. The IP is 10.1.1.100. This is an optional IP I have configured. Someone can ask me the following question, but Mehdi, where the IP 10.1.1.100 is coming from? The WAF has the 10.1.1.1, and the answer is you can add as IP addresses as you want, as many as you want. Of course, the WAF itself is using 10.1.1.1, but it can also listen in another interface, in another IP. I decided to use the 10.1.1.100. Now, the combination between the IP and the port, this is what we call in FortiWeb terminology a virtual server. And this is also used in many other vendors' terminology. What is a virtual server? It's a virtual IP that doesn't really exist in the interface, but the WAF is listening on. Now, if this client is pointing to that IP, which is virtual, the WAF will accept it, process it, and then forward it. So the virtual server is the answer to the first question. Which port IP are we listening on? And the answer is brought by the VS, okay? Virtual server. Now, what is the second question? The second question is, how are we supposed to protect the application? Now, we know that when the traffic points to a virtual server, which is nothing more than an IP, I selected 100, listening on port 1. This is my VS. The second question is, how are we supposed to protect it? Are we supposed to be very strict, or are we supposed to be, a little bit permissive? We want to make it secure, but we don't want to make it very secure. So I want to define the level of security I want to apply. Some people can tell me, but Mehdi, it's obvious. I want always to provide the maximum security. And I can tell you that this is not always true. Let me give you an advice about security in general. Whenever you make it very secure, when you apply maximum security, you are having less connectivity, which means maybe the WAF starts dropping legitimate traffic. Okay, the more security you add, the less flexibility and connectivity you have. The less security you have, the more connectivity you are providing. Now, let me ask you a nice question. What is important for you? Security or connectivity? What do you think? Ayman is saying security. Hayat is saying both. Who is right? Akram is saying balancing. Who is right, guys? Esma is saying also both. Yusuf is saying depends. Keep Yusuf's answer for a moment, okay? Let me now ask you another question. What if I tell you that I'm protecting an application for an online shop? Do you prefer that your web application get breached, or your clients lose access at all to your application? So you're selling, I don't know, you're selling just clothes to your clients. Do you prefer that your clients lose connectivity at all, or you get hacked? What do you prefer? When I say get hacked, you mean they will compromise some security things, like they can steal information. What do you think? Abdul Razak is saying the worst thing is to lose connectivity. And Abdul Razak is right. Guys, for an online shop, okay, since it's not, selling something very, very sensitive, connectivity can be much more important than security. But what if I'm telling you that this is a website for a national security agency? This is something related to Homeland Security, okay? Something related to national security. What do you think? We lose access to the data or connectivity, or we got breached? What is the worst situation? To get our security compromised or connectivity compromised? For a national security organization, like, I don't know, the NSA in the United States, the Ministry of Defense in Algeria, something like that, security is more important. So the answer is, it depends. It depends on the business, and this is not something we decide at technical level. Providing maximum security to decrease connectivity, or providing less security to increase connectivity, this is not something we decide at technical level. This is something we decide at the policy level, which means at the executive level. This is not something we decide as engineers, okay? It's the CTO, the CEO, the committee board, something like that, who can make such decisions. Now, if we get back to our business, remember that my goal is to provide security. So I have to answer the question, okay? Do I want to have a maximum security or just a minimum security? And the second question, the level of security, is answered by configuring what we call a web protection profile. When you configure a web protection profile in FortiWeb, you are specifying which security controls you want to apply. Do you want to have signature-based detections? Yes or no? Do you want to have anti-DDoS or DDoS protection? Yes or no? Do you want to have CSRF specific protections? Yes or no? The web protection profile is a container that should be configured and contain all the security controls you want. The more you have, the more secure it is, the less connectivity you may have. The less you use, the less secure you are, the more connectivity you choose. So that's a big question. And this is the second component. We got what are we supposed to do with the VS is just a listener. The protection profile is deciding how are we supposed to secure. And the last question is, where is exactly the application located? Is the web application hosted in the WAF? Of course not. The application is hosted in the backend servers. So the backend servers, which are the 172.16.1.102.1 and 2, these are what we call real servers or backend servers. Now in the WAF, the third component that we have to configure is the real servers pool. What is the real servers pool? It's a configuration object containing the list of all the real servers. In my case, it's the 172.16.1.101 and same thing .102. When you have configured the three components, you know exactly which IP is listening, how to protect, and where to forward. I bring everything together inside a WAF policy. So the policy is the last component that will organize these other objects, put them together to provide access to the web application. Is it clear? Can you now understand what is a VS, what is a web application, web protection profile, what is a server pool, and what is a policy? Are you able to answer the question? Okay, so I'll take this silence as a yes. Now, let me take this in action, or let me show you how to do that. So I will go to my FortiWeb. And I will start by configuring a VS. How? I will go to server objects, server, and I find virtual server. Now here you see that it's a completely new WAF. There is no VS inside. I will click. My website is a free watermelon shop. If you want to get a watermelon for free, go to my website, you can get one for free. So I will call it free shop VS. Why I'm using the name free shop? Because I can have a VS for my free shop website, another VS for my webmail, another VS for my, and you can have hundreds of web applications. Each one has its own dedicated VS. So I created free shop VS. When you create it, you have to provide which virtual IP. What is a virtual IP? I will specify free shop VIP. What is this? I'm specifying the virtual IP 10.1.1.100. Remember, it's called virtual because it doesn't exist on a specific interface, and it's listening. I'm adding that IP to port 1 in addition to the existing IP. Then I have selected this virtual IP. So my VS is simply an object listening on port 1, 10.1.100. And I'm done. I configured my VS. Now I go and I have to prepare what we call a web protection profile. You go to web protection and you go, you go to policy and you find web protection profile. The good thing is that most web application firewalls come with ready-to-use profiles. So you don't have to be an expert in web security to configure that. You can use one from the existing list. Of course, you can create one if you're a specialist, you understand what you're doing. Akram is saying, can we assign the same address as the real? Yes, you can use the same real interface, but it's not, it's not recommended. Okay, use another one. Inside the web protection profile, you see you can configure signatures. These are also ready-to-use objects. You can configure some cookie security features, CSRF, header security. There is also specific SQL and XSS injection-based detection. All of these, to understand them, you have to be aware about the web attack. When you understand, for example, what is a DOS, you can understand how to create a DOS policy. If you understand what is the SQL and XSS, you can configure this syntax-based protection. For now, remember, we are focusing on the networking and deployment phase. I will not configure any protection profile. I will use one of them. In the beginning, I will use the inline alert only. This alert only is a protection profile that will not stop any attack. It will just log and send you alerts. So I will use it. I will test some attacks, show you the logs. Then I will change the protection profile from the alert only to the inline extended protection. Extended protection is more secure than standard protection. So I will just use it because it's more secure. And I will try again another attack to show you that the WAF is blocking that. So we created the VS. We already have a protection profile ready to use. Now it's time to create, to create the server pool. So I got some questions. What is the interest of using VS address than just working with one address? The goal is for scalability. Mahmoud, if we are planning to get further applications in the future, it's better to get one VS for each application. Now I'm doing that for my free shop. Next day, I will do it for another shop, another webmail. The best practice is to use one VS dedicated for each application. Okay? Omar is saying, could we set load balancing also? And that's a good question. Can we use load balancing? The answer is yes. How to do it? It's inside the server pool. You will see how, Omar. So we created the VS. It's here. Now it's time to create the server pool. I will call it free shop real servers pool. Okay. Like this. Now, what is a server pool, guys? It's the list of servers we have. Now I will just say, okay. It will give me the possibility to create now the list. But before doing that, can you tell me how many servers do I have? Of course, you can see I have 2. So if I go to my server pool, you can select if you plan to add a single server or you want to balance between servers. In my case, I have 2. I have to create server balance. Now, when you try to balance between servers, what if one of the servers is down? There is a power issue with the first server. The load balancer, or the WAF in this case, should be aware about lost servers. This is why we are supposed to configure what we call health checks. Now, what is a health check? This is an object. If I select, for example, ICMP, the WAF will simply ping both servers. Whenever the server doesn't reply to a ping, the WAF understands that the server is down. So if it stops forwarding to that server. So whenever you have load balancing, health check is very important. Now, how the load balancing is done? If you keep the round robin, it means first connection is to the first one, second connection to the second one, third connection to the third one, fourth connection to the second one. Round robin is just, weighted 50-50 balancing. We have many other load balancing algorithms, most powerful, without getting into the details, in a pretty nice way. The most important is to use, where is it? In this specific case, to use the weighted round robin. Sometimes you don't have exactly the same resources in your servers. Maybe one server is more powerful than the other. So you can just do a weighted round robin. Persistence, I'm not getting into the details, okay? But persistence allows the WAF to keep the same client using the same server. For example, if I don't configure persistence, this guy, maybe he will be load balanced to this server. He will authenticate, so he will log in, but the next time he sends something, the WAF sends it to the other server. So he needs to authenticate again. The persistence is an object that instructs the WAF to remember something and keep sending traffic from the same client. Whenever it's the same client, we forward to the same server. This is what we call persistence. It's to stop load balancing when we know that this is the same HTTP session. There is, many persistence configurations we can do using cookie, source IP. We can use URLs. But I said I'm not getting into the details. Now, I will not configure any persistence. I will say, okay, so I configured balance, okay, health check, round robin. Now it's time to add the list. Click create new, and I'm adding the first server. I can add it through its IP. I can add it through its FQDN. If I have a cloud connectivity, I can add a server hosted in the cloud. So in my case, I will just say 172.16.1.101. And that's all. Just provide the IP, and this is the default port on which the server is listening. I can add the other one, 172.16.1.102. So my server pool, what's happening? Let me try again. I have added one. Oh, it seems that my configuration wasn't saved. So let me go back. I think this is a bug in the GUI. Okay, let me try again. 172.16.1.101. And then I add the other one. Same IP, but 102. Yes. So my server pool now includes two servers, and it's load balancing between them using round robin. And it's checking the health of each one of them by sending ICMP pings. Okay, I configured the three components: VS, server pool, web protection profile. Now it's time to bring everything together inside a server policy. Policy, server policy, and I will configure a new one. Remember that each application must have a dedicated policy in order to work. Without a policy, the FortiWeb denies all accesses. Whoever is trying to access to anything, it's blocked by the FortiWeb. Why? Because there is no policies to allow that. So let us allow this. So I create a new one. I will call it free shop policy. The deployment we are using, we want to load balance. The virtual server listening is free shop VS 10.1.1.100. And I want to forward to these real servers. So whoever connects to that VS will be forwarded to that pool. Now, is the forwarding happening directly? I mean, whoever is pointing to that VS, are we systematically forwarding to that pool? The answer is no. Why? Because number one, we match the VS. Number two is to inspect the traffic. So number one will be the VS. Number two will be the web protection profile. So I go and select, for example, the inline alert only. Remember, this profile is not about to block. It's only here to log. So when I selected the web protection profile, I selected the VS and the real server. Let me show you now the logic behind. You can imagine the following, guys. You know, imagination is very important to assimilate and remember the concept. The client will always point to the VS, which is 10.1.1.100, and this is the first thing that will process the traffic. If the IP and the listening port are correct, we accept it. Then the traffic is forwarded to the web protection profile. So the second object that will process the traffic is the web protection profile. All the security controls you configured will be executed. XSS, SQL, anti-DDoS, and so on. If the traffic is malicious, it will be blocked. But if the traffic is legitimate, the web protection profile will forward it to the server pool, which is the third component. The server pool determines what are the exact servers and which load balancing algorithm we are supposed to use. So the VS is defining the IP and port. The web protection profile is specifying the controls. The server pool is specifying the real servers and how to load balance between them. We have everything to make the connection happen. Now, just let me save. Oh, I just forgot to configure something. What is the connection port? It's HTTP. It means TCP/80. What is the HTTPS? If the people want to use HTTPS, I'm listening on the port HTTPS, which is by default. This is by default 443. Now, when we do that, we save. We have this nice and pretty policy listening on that VIP or that VS using these TCP ports, load balancing, and it's using the real servers that we configured inside the pool. Now we have to test. Guys, is it clear for now? So we are done with this deployment and configuration. Now it's time to test. Any question before we test? Okay, Omar is saying, is it blocked or only notified because we have inline alert only? The answer is only notified. I specified the protection profile alert only. I did it in purpose to show you that attacks can pass, but the WAF is watching. And then I will change it. I will replace it with the extended protection. This will block. And I will try again. So we'll make two tests. Okay, so let me try from my Kali Linux just to access. This is the client. So guys, before we do it, very important to visualize. If I go back to my topology, so we configured the VS, right? VS is listening on port 1, 10.1.1.100. We have configured the server pool. The pool includes this IP and this IP. So this is object number 1. This is object number 3. And we have used the inline alert only. This is object number 3. The protection profile alert only. So how are we supposed to test this? I will go to my Kali Linux and I will use http://10.1.1.100. The 100 is the virtual server, the listening IP. The Kali will point here, get inspected with this guy, this protection profile, then it will be forwarded to one of these two servers. I don't know which one, but it will be one of them. And I will try to use anything to simulate an attack. I will try to do a SQL injection, for example. And I will check the logs. Okay, that's the steps. Let me do it. So I will go to my Kali Linux. I'll open Firefox. Okay. 10.1.1.100. Oh, sorry. 10.1.1.100. Okay. Let me try again. Okay. You see? Now, OWASP Algeria, free watermelon. Now I just modified just the server name to know that you are now pointing to server 2. If I just refresh, and you have to use Control F5 to avoid Firefox cache. Load balancing sent me now to server 1, server 2, 1. This is round robin, and there is no persistence. Now, in this website, I have also hosted the damn vulnerable web application. So if you use DVW web application. Oh, come on. The DVWA, you see? So let me just try something. Okay, let me just make it slow. Let me try a small SQL injection. I can just use the OR 1 = 1, something like that. You see, this is just to simulate, you see, a small SQL injection. Okay, guys, the idea here is not to explain SQL injections, okay? Just to trigger the logs. Now remember that the traffic is going through the WAF. So if I go back to my WAF, okay, how am I supposed to see that? Go to log and reports, go to log access. Now, since this is related to attacks, I can go to attack and I can see this. You see, the single access has triggered a lot of signatures. If I just double click on the last one, you see, I can see the threat level is, this is high, severe. The risk is, the client is malicious. And you can see the CVE related, since this is a generic SQL injection, there is no CVE related to that. You can see the OWASP top 10 related attacks. You see the A3 from the 2021 OWASP top 10. So you can get a lot of details about the attack happening. What is the matching pattern? You see the header, the HTTP header that caused that. All the HTTP parameters. From this, so you are monitoring what's going on. Now let me try to just change the web protection profile. Now I don't want, so policy, server policy. I don't want to just monitor. I want to block. So I will go and replace the alert only with the extended protection. Okay. So the next time the FortiWeb is watching this, it will stop it. If I go back to the client and I try again the same thing, you see, I can access /DVWA. I go to the same, I will try exactly the same thing. Still low, right? I will go to SQL injection and I will try again something like that. Yes, or one. And now you can see the web page is blocked. You can get the exact URL you are trying to access. And here you see the attack ID. Now, what is the attack ID? It's something that allows you in the WAF to track exactly which signature has made it, which signature or which kind of attacks you have detected. So if I go again, log, and here you can see other logs. You see here the logs are saying it's exactly the same attack being detected, but the action taken is different. You can see from the logs that in the first attempt, all the attacks were getting the action alert. So no deny. When you see the erase, it means that the packet was dropped and the replacement message web page has been pushed to the client. And that makes it all for this demo. Do you have any question, guys? Any question? No questions? Okay, Yusuf. Omar Shaban is saying, could we prevent DDoS? Yes. You know, Omar, some DOS or DDoS attacks can be prevented. Okay, there is a specific feature for that. It's called DOS protection. But don't take it as a general truth. Some DDoS attacks cannot be prevented or detected. Some DDoS attacks are extremely, extremely difficult to be stopped or even mitigated. But generally, for some small or low-scale DDoS attacks, yes, you can prevent them, you can detect them. Yusuf, you're welcome. Yes, Yusuf, what's the question? So the question is, thanks for the presentation. You're welcome. It's my pleasure. For some dealing with cybersecurity products, what's the difference between a secure web gateway and an application firewall? Oh, that's a good one. So guys, Yusuf is asking about the difference between a secure web gateway and a WAF. Now, when you say secure web gateway, you're talking about protecting your own users. So you are caring about your users from the malicious websites. It's your users who you want to protect. But if you're talking about a WAF, it's not about protecting your users, it's about protecting your web servers or applications. So the difference is, who are you protecting? And when you're talking about web gateways, you hear the term proxy. Whenever you're dealing with WAFs, you most of the time hear about reverse proxy. And this is just a terminological issue. What do I mean by that? The proxy is something you use to protect users. The reverse proxy is something you use to protect applications from users. So the user here can be a hacker. So the reverse proxy protects backend servers. The proxy protects users against malicious websites. And that's the main difference between them. Different goals. Thank you, Mehdi. Yes, that's exactly that, Omar. Yes. So guys, since there is no questions, I think that's all for this first session. I think I should let the OWASP team take over.
Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So first of all, I would like to thank everybody for your active participation and engagement through this WAF training session. So if anyone have question, please, or need any clarification, please go ahead and ask it in the chat, or you can reach us in our social media. Okay, so don't hesitate. So just to summary, we have covered the essential aspect of web application firewall, from understanding their importance and configuring them and doing a demo how to do so. And of course, we'll be also sharing a list of additional resources and materials for further study. This can help solidify whatever you have learned today and take understanding even further. So if you have any question, please ask them in the chat. Otherwise, we will finish this session. And I would invite you for the next session, which will be the 1st of October. Yes, of course, Mohammed. We will get recorded the video later.
We got a question from, I think it was Yusuf. Yes. Can I answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. So Yusuf, you have very, very interesting questions. The last one is, how are we supposed to dimension, like size, a WAF? And to be honest with you, I can just give you some guidelines. So what can you consider when you are sizing or you are dimensioning your WAF? But you can never be 100% accurate. Okay, sizing in security is something very, very complex. But what you have to take in consideration is the number of applications you have. If you have a lot of applications, you have to acquire a large model. If you are having just few applications, you can acquire a smaller model. Now, even the size of each application, if you are protecting an application larger like a Facebook application, it's not like you're protecting a small online shopping website. It's not like having a very, very small website with few pages. So the size of each application, the number of web applications, and also the features you want to apply. If you require a high security, let's say, posture, you need really deep controls with large applications and also many applications, you should acquire a large WAF. And this is the case if you go, for example, to Algeria Telecom. They have millions of customers, many applications. They are for sure deploying large WAFs. Okay, so these are the three different key points you have to take in consideration. So Omar is saying, is it possible to configure proxy and reverse proxy in the same appliance? The answer for Fortinet is yes. FortiGate, which is the next generation firewall provided by Fortinet, has proxy capabilities. We call it FortiProxy. It's a full featured proxy, I mean gateway. In the same time, it has not a full featured, but a quite interesting WAF capabilities. So the next generation firewall can also provide these both features. But this is, a rare product in the market. Many other vendors do not provide WAF and proxy in the same appliance. Okay. Abaidi, what's the question? The virtual address of the WAF can be published on the internet or just use a WAF to listen to the... So the answer to that question is you will never find the virtual server with a public IP. The reality, there is always a NAT device, whether it's a router or a firewall, and then the client is pointing to that NAT device. Then there is a virtual IP, or what we call a destination NAT, that will translate it to an internal private IP. So the WAF is just configured with internal private IPs. And there is always something providing these destination NAT capabilities. So you should never find the WAF deployed and facing directly the internet. Another one from Yusuf. From the industry perspective, I think most vendors tend to offer products offering WAF, secure web gateways, like Fortinet security. Do you agree on that? I'm not really, I don't have the authority to agree or not, but from the technical perspective, the answer is it depends. If I'm a small business, I don't know, I'm a small office in Algeria, I don't have many security requirements, I don't have the budget, it would be very interesting for me to get a next generation firewall. It will be cheap, not really complex. One person can manage it, and it can provide with the minimum security I want. So that will be a good idea for a small business. For a large business, in the other hand, will be not a very nice idea. You cannot be in the same time a Ferrari and a truck. Of course, you can get a Ferrari with the small, area to handle things, but a Ferrari still focus on speed, a truck still focusing on the weight. Of course, you can pick something in between, but it will never replace them. So keep that in mind always. Mohammed is asking, the FortiWeb gives you a 15 days trial. It's not for free, but you can use it for 15 days for free. Okay, so welcome. It was a pleasure for me. And again, for the OWASP Algeria chapter team, thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. Thank you so much for this
Welcome.
information. يعطيك الصحة خويا.
بارك الله فيك.
Thank you. So, team, stay tuned for more training opportunities and events that will be announced soon. And as Mehdi said, so we will have another session next week, inshallah. A special thank to you, Mehdi Sammar, for delivering such comprehensive and insightful session. Your expertise is truly appreciated. Once again, thank you all of being part of this training. We hope you found this valuable, and we look forward to seeing you at future session. Have a great day, guys, and stay tuned. And please, if you have any question, reach out in our mail. As you can see here, Algiers leader at OWASP.org. You can reach out in our social media. You can reach out Mehdi directly as you want. Thank you so much, team. See you in the next session training, inshallah.